from the Botanical Conservatory. We are so lucky to have her. Marlene is the staff horticulturist at the Botanical Conservatory, where she helps to care for their collection of around 4,000 species. She's also known as the Plant Lady on Good Day Sacramento, where she answers viewers' questions. And in addition, she writes for the Sacramento Bee, and she also has her own podcast, Flower Power Garden Hour. So we are so lucky to have her. Normally we do this series in person, but one of the fun things about the pandemic is getting creative and connecting you all to nature through technology. So I'm going to be monitoring the chat for your questions. So, and Marlene is happy to accommodate them as they come up, and I'll just keep track of that. But if there's any other questions, you can put them in the chat. But without further ado, I want to hand it over to Marlene. Thank you.
All right, thanks. First, I'll say this would be great to do in the greenhouse, but the Wi-Fi is very bad in the greenhouse. So we get the background of our propagation containers back there, the easy clones. So yeah, we're gonna, we only have an hour, but this is gonna be easy propagation. What I mean by that, it means semi-hardwood, softwood cuttings, and leaf cuttings. So we're not gonna talk about woody cuttings, but the technique pretty much is almost the same. And I have a small little PowerPoint, and there are some, I don't want you to feel like all of a sudden you're in school, unless you like to be in school. But we're gonna start with just this little diagram here of a plant. And we're gonna go through some plant parts that are important. I know there's fabulous gardeners out there. My father-in-law is one of them. But if I were to ask him, why does that happen when you do that? He probably doesn't know. Does that make him a less of a gardener? No, not at all. But I feel like if you know certain things and how just the basics of how plants work a little bit, it's going to help you become a better gardener and maybe impress your friends too, if that's something you want to do. I don't know. So here we go. We have an arrow pointing to the very tip, and that is called the shoot apical meristem. So if you think of a redwood tree, the very tip is the shoot apical meristem. So redwood trees are very apically dominant, we say. Also on the sides, you could have shoot apical meristems. It's basically meaning the tip of a branch is your shoot apical meristem. And then roots have them too, right? So down at the roots, you have the apical meristems as well. And then in between, you have these things called nodes. And nodes are where your leaves are going to grow off of, branches are going to grow off of, maybe flower and therefore fruit is going to grow off of them. And they're important, and we'll explain why in a bit. So there's another node, right? So basically you could find a node if you see a leaf and you trace back to it. And it's usually a swollen area and pretty distinct, but not always. Axillary bud. So that's going to be that little swollen bud on your stem at the base of sort of right where that node is at. And then, so I already mentioned that the node is where a stem or a leaf is connected. And really important is it's a concentration of meristematic tissue. So this is why it's really important. And when students, a lot of our biology students, they learn about this, and I'm like, what is this called again? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, I know, do you know this? So, and yeah, so there's dormant growth points found at nodes, right? They're not always active. Sometimes they're dormant, like on a deciduous tree. You could see the buds, you can see the nodes, but they're not actively growing. And so this is what's really important about that meristematic tissue, is it's the major site of where new roots or shoots are made. So it's basically, it's an area of undifferentiated tissue and cells that, based on environmental cues, or what we're going to do here today, we're making it form something that if it was left on the plant, it wouldn't necessarily do, and therefore roots. So if a plant is happy, it may put on flowers to produce seeds. Of course, sometimes stressed plants will put on flowers if it's stressed as a last chance to produce seeds. If a branch was eaten off, it may find that it needs to grow another branch, and another branch will grow from that meristem. And why do plants have meristems? So it's an insurance. So interesting fact that all plants have stems. And you'll find plants that don't have roots, like Tillandsia, the air plants, right? No roots at all. You'll find plants that don't have leaves at all. So think of cacti. Some of them have greatly reduced, and there's even some orchids that have absolutely no leaves. But every single plant is going to have a stem because everything stems from the stem. And stems are where you find that meristematic tissue. And what we say here is, what's the happiest part of the plant? It's the meristem, right? So yeah, it's just insurance that your plant's going to continue to grow, right? So let's see here. There we go. There's the inner nodes. So you have nodes that we're going to be talking about and inner nodes. That's the area obviously between the nodes. And then so we're going to be talking about two major hormones, right? Hormones are important. We all know in humans they're very important. And so plant hormones too. There's a lot of plant hormones and they do all interact just like our hormones. So you can't say, oh yeah, this one's definitely just for this. You know, if you stop producing one, of course, it's going to mess with the other ones. But we're going to talk about two that are really fundamentally important with the propagation that we're going to do today. And they are auxin, right? And this is, now here's the thing, this is where you're going to learn how these plants work in conjunction with these two hormones. It's produced at the active growing shoot, meristems, and young leaves. So when you have active new growth, you could think of that area being your powerhouse and production center for auxin, right? It is producing the hormone auxin when you see new growth on your plant. And it moves down with gravity. So it's just being produced up top, and then it's moving down with gravity towards the roots. That's its aim, is to get to the roots. And it moves in the sugar transport, which is the phloem. And what it's doing is it's traveling down all those axillary buds, those dormant buds. It's basically going, nope, nope, you can't grow. Nope, 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 I got this. It's basically putting all those buds that could grow, but it's holding them in check. And a perfect example of this, again, is your redwood tree. Redwood trees have that very, very top point. They're very apically dominant. You can think at the very top, it's producing tons of auxin and it's moving down. If you cut the top of a redwood tree, all of a sudden you reduce that auxin, it's not holding those side points in check, and pretty soon you're going to have a redwood bush. That's why you never want to top a redwood tree, because that's what's happening hormonally to it. So it's prohibiting side growth. And importantly here, it is going to promote root growth at low concentrations, right? You don't want to add tons of it because then it'll just most likely do something else to your plant, like kill it possibly. So it's going to promote root growth at low concentrations when it gets down with gravity. So it's incredibly important for root formation. That's why we're talking about it today. And so if you've ever bought rooting hormone, that's what you're buying. You're buying synthetic forms of auxin. And actually, I think one of the bad herbicides, 2,4-D, is an auxin. So you're basically just killing weeds with an abundance of the hormone auxin. But when you're buying it to do roots, you're buying a mild form and you're buying a synthetic form of auxin. So the other hormone is cytokinin. So you have auxin being produced at their growing points. Then you have cytokinin. Where is it produced? It's produced at the active growing root meristems. So it's being produced down below, underneath where you have your roots. And it's going to move upwards to the shoots and the leaves. So you see these two hormones are working in conjunction with each other, but opposite. And it's going to move in the water transport, which is the xylem. So they're just sort of like passing each other. Hey, Bob, how you doing? I'm good, Bob. How you doing? And it wants to promote the side growth. So as it's moving up the plant, it's trying to cause side growth, where when auxin's moving down, it's trying to inhibit side growth. And this is why our plants actually have shape to them, because if these two hormones weren't working opposite each other, your plants would just be like, and yeah, some of our plants are like that because of bad pruning techniques. And some are just gangly plants in general. But in general, they're holding the plant in check and allowing it to have some sort of structure and design. So if anyone grows orchids out there, and you have an orchid, and all of a sudden it's done flowering, and you have the flower spike, the flowers fall out. If you don't cut that, what you may get is a little baby plant growing off of it. And it is called a kiki. And there is a synthetic form of cytokinin that's called kiki paste, because what's happening on your orchid right there is there's an abundance of cytokinin causing that foliage growth, side growth, and it's forming a new plant. And yeah, you could break those off and start, you have a new orchid. So kiki paste is the cytokinin, synthetic cytokinin that you could use. And we've done experiments with it. It's definitely not as easy as using auxin, because we've done it on some of our slow growing succulents and cacti that won't produce seed for us. They don't flower enough to produce seed. A lot of cacti produce side pups. Well, some of them won't. So what we'll do is take a knife and cut into the top of the cacti and apply that kiki paste. And that sort of forces new baby plants, new pups to form right there. I usually just show these successful times, not the times where we cut into a cactus and it rots completely out. But that happens. That anytime you cut into a cacti, that's what you risk that. But we use it for our slow growing cacti. All right, so why is this important besides what we're talking about today as far as cuttings? So I'm sure, like a lot of you have a potted plant. You're like, okay, I'm going to transplant it. Well, I'm going to prune it. Now I'm going to transplant it. We've stopped doing that at the conservatory for this main reason is, so think about, you go and you prune your plant off. You've just cut off all the active growing tips. You've just cut off all the hormone being produced that is responsible for root formation. Now you take it out of its pot and you're going to damage roots. That just happens. So when you break off the tips of the roots, you're just breaking off the cytokinin machine right there. So now the plant doesn't have the hormones being produced to form new leaves and shoots, and it doesn't have the hormones to produce new roots. So when you put it in a new pot, it may not grow at all because it's confused. It's like, I don't have any hormones to put on new leaves. Do you have anything down there to put on any new roots? Nothing. So what we do is we prune, then we wait for new growth, and then we'll transplant into a new pot. That way we have the hormones that are going to be there to form new roots when we disturb them. And that's why I tell people to, like if you have a dormant plant, transplant it closer to springtime when it starts leafing out. And that way you have that active growing root system and the hormones that are going to help it along. So that's just sort of a tip that we've taken on. Of course, sometimes some plants don't even care, like a pelargonium, geranium, doesn't care. Other ones, like, don't care. But if you, especially finicky plants, you're gonna want to maybe take this tip and put that into practice. All right, what happens when you prune plant parts? Right, so there's your cut right there, right? You just sort of cut off the apical meristem, the top right there, right? So that side branch is going to take effect because you just removed that auxin. Now it's allowing the cytokinin to take control, and it's like, woohoo, I get to put new growth on. It's my day, right? So this an idea, this is basically what happens when you pinch a plant. So say you have a coleus plant, that's a very colorful foliage plant, and it gets a little leggy, right? Stretched out, and you want it bushier. When you pinch a plant back, that's what you're doing. You're forcing more side growth so it looks fuller. So that's the whole idea behind pinching a plant to make it bushier, is by removing the auxin and allowing that cytokinin to produce side growth. So when you have less auxin and more cytokinin, you get shoots. So here, down below, looks like we're cutting a root, right? And all of a sudden you're getting a plant right there, right? And then right here, you're gonna cut. So this is what we're gonna do with our cutting right here. And I should say, going back to that root right there, that's what happens when you remove a tree and you remove a root from a tree, and all of a sudden it starts sprouting. You've just cut off that, you pulled up the cytokinin, and cytokinin forces shoots. So some of you, if you've removed a tree and all of a sudden pieces of roots start growing in your lawn, that's what's happening, is there's hormones in that are pooling in that cut area that are now forming foliage. So if you keep chopping it down, eventually it'll probably stop growing. Not always, but that's the idea behind it. So the next little cut right here is what we're basically going to be doing for cuttings. You're going to be cutting below a node. And oh my God, there's the roots forming right there, I should say. There we go. Roots are going to form right there. So that's our cutting. That's the whole idea of how we're going to make free plants from existing plants. And those free plants could be from neighbors. Try not to go into, bad practice to go into nurseries and take plant parts. That's just not good. If you want cuttings from the conservatory, you could always ask. But so when you have high auxin and low cytokinin, then you're going to get roots. And that's what we're going to focus on today, is we're going to make sure auxin pools up where we're cutting, and then that's going to force roots to grow. And let's see what else we got here. Okay, I just want to show you where we propagate our cuttings. It's not a fancy system. This is our mist bench. We do have bottom heat. It's not a requirement, but they do there's pretty cheap seedling mats. You can even buy a windowsill one. Note though that my cats have knocked things off of them because they think the heating pad is for them. They're like, this is great. So I've come and all my seedlings have been knocked off because the cats are laying on the heating mats. So we have a heating mat. And then the idea is having misters. And of course, you can't do this at home necessarily. So I'm going to show you a way of getting around it. Because remember, the cuttings don't have roots. So they're not picking up moisture necessarily or at all from roots. So they have to get frequent irrigation, frequent moisture to end up on their leaves. So plants are able to absorb moisture and nutrients through openings on their leaves called stomata. And as what we like to say, what's stomata with you? So it's one of our bad plant puns. Come on, we got to have them, right? We just recycle them, right? Recycling's in, so that's what we do. So this is our mist system, and you can see, and I'm going to show you, this isn't straight perlite. I'm going to show you, this is vermiculite and perlite. And as soon as these start forming roots, we'll take them off, let them sit, adapt to being off of the mist bench, and then pot them up into soil, into their own pot. And I'm going to go over what's happening here too. And so that's our mist bench. It gets, it's light, has bottom heat, frequent mist on there. Some of them you can see are bagged, and I'll explain why. And so these are the different hormones that we have. We have a whole collection of hormones. This is generally what you would buy at the store. They usually just sell one strength of it, which is the most mild. And that's what for semi-hardwood and softwood cuttings, that's the hormone. And then one's pretty much the equivalent, and then 3. And then 45 would be something that's very woody, like a woody hibiscus. I've used 30 on them, but 45 would be something, because you would need more auxin because it's older growth. So it's further away from that auxin producing tip. So the woodier means the less auxin, meaning the less hormone. So I'm going to explain why we actually, when we do cuttings, for the most part, don't even bother with rooting hormone, right? So very rarely do we use any of this. And let's see here. Okay, I want to talk about this. This was on the mist bench. Just because I have a quick example of it when we're done with the PowerPoint, but I want to show you that this is the version of leaf cuttings. I was saying we were talking about semi-hardwood and stem cuttings. Some plants will take root from leaves, not all. So you're going to, begonias, African violets, sansevierias, which is the mother-in-law's tongue, certain gasterias, even our corpse plant, believe it or not, sections of the leaf, that's how we form new plants. The giant corpse plant, the one that smells like a dead body, that's how we propagate it, is from leaf portions of leaf cuttings. And then the ZZ plant. So you want a new leaf, but so here we've just taken begonia cuttings, and generally it's good to have a major vein attached to it. So, like a little portion right here may not, but right here. And then you just submerge that area and a new baby plant will form. And so here's an African violet leaf. I don't know why the bottom's cut off. I thought I was trying to get a little maybe artistic there. So here's the leaf that you snipped off. with the petiole. Remember, the petiole is the stem of the leaf, not really a stem. You just need to bury that even, and then a new plant will form at the base, and then that leaf will slowly just die away. And so this begonia here is the iron cross begonia. You can't do, some begonias you could do stem cuttings of, like cane begonia is very easy to do, but others don't form, their stems are basically very condensed and at the base, and you can't really do stem cuttings, so you could do leaf cuttings. So this is the iron cross begonia. And this is what I did. I took a tray, a small tray with holes, and this is perlite. This is one of the planting medias that we use. You could use straight perlite. Never work with this dry. It is a volcanic, like glass product, and it creates a lot of dust. So if you breathe that in, you're getting that in your lungs. So it's a good idea. We always use it only when we've wetted it to keep the dust down. And I just have a pair of little snips. I took 2 new leaves of it. You don't want to use the older leaves. Took the new leaves, and then I cut them into little pieces, and pretty small pieces actually. And I laid them on top, and some of them are upside down, some of them are the right side. I just sort of did this confetti thing.
Hey, Marlene,
Yeah.
We have a question.
Okay.
So my local nursery recommended using vitamin B1 for root growth and to reduce plant shock.
No, that's a myth.
The rest of the question just says the product is Liquinox Start 020. Would you recommend? I mean,
no, that's actually a big, sorry, I didn't mean to shake my head, but I just finished a podcast episode with the guy who's written 2 books about garden myths. And he's really great. If you're into garden myths, go to gardenmyths.com. The guy is just phenomenal. He's a biochemist by trade. And yeah, this one's been debunked. B1 does nothing for plants. And sometimes, you know, if you've ever run trials, you know, there's a control and then there's the experiment one. And I have a feeling if you did both practices the same, you would have equal results with and without. The only difference maybe that helps and people see a result is there is a little bit of nitrogen in it. So that is going to possibly help it. You know, nitrogen is your green formula, produces chlorophyll and makes growth happen, possibly. But no, if you do everything proper, even if you don't do everything proper, B1's not going to help you. Yeah, so don't buy it. It's such a waste. I wish nurseries would stop selling it. It really is just, yeah. And I don't fault anyone for buying it because we're trustworthy. Like, why would someplace make something and that could be a morals class. Maybe you could do, we'll continue. Yeah, there's so many myths out there. Drives me insane. But yeah, so better practice is doing what I said, is cutting it down, then transplanting it, doing it the right time of year, making sure the soil's adequately moist, but not too wet. Remember, you never want to work really wet soils. So I just sprinkled these on top here, and then I put them on the mist bench. So they were able to get just periodic bursts of moisture. Now here you could see the little babies forming. Some of them didn't make it, right? But out of those 2 leaves, I got 10 plants, 10 new begonia plants from 2 leaves. So here the new babies were starting to grow. I just call them babies.
We have a quick question here. Would you say those are 1 inch by 1 inch cuts?
Yeah, I would say that. And you know, ideally, we were doing it I was doing that as an experiment. And you know, we do sell that plant when we have plant sales. So we were trying to get as many as possible. But if for a home grower who just wants 1 and doesn't want 20 plants, I would recommend using 1 leaf or half of a leaf and burying that main vein. You're better chances of it right there. But yeah, those were about 1 inch by 1 inch, because I definitely feel like that main vein coming down is where the rooting's going to happen and the plants are going to form more so. So sorry about the hokey picture, but I wanted to show you that there are some plants that will root by leaves cuttings, but will never form a plant. So there's a grocery store locally, Trader Joe's, that sells these pots of the Hoya carrii. It's that Hoya with the perfectly heart-shaped leaf. it will be rooted. It will never form a plant. And just like this fiddle leaf figs are very in right now, and these rooted, and they stay rooted until the whole leaf just sort of degraded down. And I've heard that, oh yeah, some people have gotten plants from it. I really have never seen the pictures to prove it. But so this just goes to show you that some leaves will have the auxin in the leaves to form roots, but they probably don't have the meristematic tissue then to produce, or even the cytokinin then to produce the leaves and form into a plant. So just be careful out there. You know, it's cute to buy a little heart leaf and it'll stay there a long time. And okay, one other way, and it was in the slide, so I just want to show you that if you've tried stem cuttings and you tried leaf cuttings and nothing's working, there is a way to do stem cuttings with the cutting still on the plant. There's two different ways. I'm not going to go into air layering, but this one's called trenching. So I think this is a jasmine here, and I just used it because it was very pliable. But I'm sure you've gone outside and you've gone to go prune a limb that's laying close to the ground, and you go lift it up, and you're like, oh, it's rooted in. Well, why did it root in? Well, when you have a branch and it's laying on the ground and it's making contact with soil, the auxin is pooling right there, right? Because you're laying it sideways, moves with gravity, so it's forming on the end of that node and it's being buried. All of a sudden, roots will form. So all you need to do here is put a pot with soil, and I use soil in this case, pin it down, and then when it forms roots, you could just cut it off the mother plant right there, and you have a new plant. And then you could just take this pot and move it elsewhere. So I've tried this on a variety of plants that are hard to root once the stem is removed from the plant. So I think that's all I've got here. Oh, then you have random plants that will do the opposite of forming roots. This is my nemesis, this plant right here. It's Needham. It's a ancestral coning plant, and it's incredibly difficult to propagate. And one day I was looking and a leaf started forming new shoots. So here it had an abundance of cytokinin, but even though these were plants, I still couldn't get it to form. You know, you'd think, okay, new growth right here forming auxin, it still didn't produce roots. So it made me mad. So I think that is it. That's your little kiki right there. So now I'm going to end this and I'm going to show you the practical side of how to do this. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Okay, hopefully everyone could see. Okay, so I'm going to go over the planting media that we like to use. So I showed you perlite, which is the white stuff, but I prefer using 50% vermiculite and 50% perlite, and both could be found at nurseries in relatively small bags, so you don't need to buy this huge bag. And same thing, remember to wet it. You fully want to wet it anyways. Something else you can use is you could use peat moss and add a little bit of perlite to aerate it, because the idea behind your planting media, why you don't want to use just soil, is one, there's no roots. So they don't need that massive water holding capability. They just need a little moisture held in below. So when they do start forming roots, you also want a lot of air movement in there too. So if you do soil, it could be a little heavy, and you're creating, you know, we're putting them on mist benches. So if it constantly got hit with a mister, the soil would be too wet and it would rot our cuttings out. So I'm just going to show you the vermiculite and perlite. Now, I have a fairly small pot here. You could fill it all the way up to the top versus like when you're potting, right? With a plant, you want, because you're watering like this, you want a little lip. Here you're not. So you could fill it up, pack it in, and you could put multiple cuttings in one pot because they're not competing for root space. So you could pack as many in as light inside allows, right? You want light to hit them. And then you always want a little hole making device, a pen or just anything. This is like a screwdriver. I don't know what that is, to make holes so you don't just jam your cuttings in there. So I'm going to show you how basic and easy it is to do. And I'm going to do it with two different plants. Okay. So this is an African violet relative. So it's not African violet. You're going to want, so where did my pruners go? I had pruners and I think someone took them. I will be right back. You leave pruners around and someone takes them. All right, so ideally you would do when the plant's blooming. So if you have a house plant, growth could happen year round, right? Because you're creating sort of a more tropical environment. Yeah, exactly. Someone's always taking mine too. Or I'm forgetting where I put them. So outside plants, you want to wait for spring because spring growth is when the new growth happens. So ideally wait for spring. You don't want it to be so soft. Some plants, you know, they're so fragile when they start growing off. Don't take those. Wait for them to harden up a little bit. You would ideally, let's see here, want the plant to be able to bend a little bit. See that? It's still bending, still green. That's perfect right there, right? And a good rule of thumb is 4 to 6 inches, but the rule is at least one node should be above the soil media. One node needs to be below the soil media because you need a place for top growth and you need a place for root growth. More nodes down below is perfectly fine. More nodes up above is perfectly fine. And generally that happens. But the rule is one node below, one node above, a little bit bendy, new growth. So I'm going to take my pruners and I'm going to cut. So there, but I'm not done yet, because you don't want any leaves to be below the soil media. So you're going to take the leaves off of the nodes, right? Because that's where the leaves are coming out that are going to be buried. And because this is a fairly short inner nodes, see if you could see right here, I'm removing at least all the leaves on, I think 3 nodes. Let's do 4 nodes. And I usually pinch them. You know, if you strip them, sometimes you break them, but there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4 nodes. So those are going to be buried. And then I'm going to have my foliage up top. And you could use a little bit of rooting hormone. And I'm going to show you just so you could see how much. I wouldn't though on this because it's new growth and it's forming enough of its own oxygen. But I'm going to take it. I'm just going to dip it in. And you should be wearing gloves. Do as I say, not as I do. How about that? And then it's just going to coat a tiny bit, right? Too much may form a massive callus, and then it might inhibit root growth. So then I'm going to take my wetted soil media, my little hole making device, make a hole, and I'll show you in a second. And then I'm going to just put it in, and I'm going to bury it, and then there's my cutting. And I actually put it at the edge because I'm going to fill this whole pot up eventually with cuttings, right? And then if you don't have a mist system, which who does, right? A baggie works perfectly fine, a Ziploc bag. So it's going to be wet already. You can mist it with some water and put it in your baggie and put it in a spot that's not going to get direct sun inside. So bright light. You know what? A humidifier will work as a mister. Yep, we do that in the science lab building. If anyone's been on the 3rd floor of the science lab building, we have a greenhouse up there. We don't have a mist bench, but we have humidifiers that run completely. So yeah, that works. Some things high humidity where you know there's going to be moisture. And some cuttings you'll find that don't even need to be bagged, but it's good practice. And you don't want water running down the sides. Or like a terrarium. If you have a terrarium, same idea. You want condensation, but not so much that it's running. And then you could just sort of open it up a little bit. And when they root, it really depends on the plant. The princess, I don't know if anyone knows the princess flower has gray fuzzy leaves and these purple flowers. That is the fastest rooting plant I've ever encountered, like 2 days. It will root. Stacy's like, yeah, it just roots like crazy. So instead of then going, okay, I think you're rooted, out you go into the rough environment. Ease it out. Maybe cut a few holes into the bag to let it adapt to the climate, then keep it out and then wait a few days. And then each of the cuttings, you're then going to pot into its own individual pot with potting soil. Another way you could tell if something is rooted is by looking underneath. You could see some roots, or doing the tug test, gentle, right? Because if you tug too hard, there's like 1 or 2 little roots forming, you might rip them off. So if you feel a little resistance, right? Not like Star Wars resistance, but a little resistance right there, then you could pot them up individually. And it really depends. Some things take like a year. Other things take, like I said, 2 days, but in average, it's a couple weeks. So I want to show you another plant to do. Here's a cane begonia. We're going to do this one here. I'm going to put it on my lap. A lot of people have this. And this one I want to show just because it's so easy to show the nodes, right? It's like, ooh, look at your nodes. You could see them right there. So see, 1 node, 2 nodes, 3 nodes, 4 nodes. And that's a great big internode, right? So I'm just going to cut it. And remember, when you cut off and you leave a little nub, go back and clean up the nub on your plant. So I'm going to put this away. Now, there's a cutting, right? There's a cutting. There's 1 node that's going to go down below, and that's all I'm probably going to do. But look at all this foliage. I don't want all this foliage because there's no roots to support this, and you don't need all this to form roots. So I'm going to remove this leaf. I'm going to remove this leaf. And if you have really big leaves, you don't need all those. I'm going to cut them in half, right? So you could cut the leaves in half, and that's going to be my cutting there, just like that. And so that's going to be buried. If I had a deep pot, that would be buried as well. And this would be up above, and those leaves would be cut. If you have flowers on your cutting, cut them off. If you have fruit on your cutting, cut them off. Their energy sinks. You don't want the energy going to that. You want it to go to root. So remove that. A tricky thing sometimes is a plant like this. Even a tomato plant. You know, if you want to overwinter your tomatoes, which it's probably a little late, they probably died the last time we had frost, but next year, is some people will think, oh, here's my stem, here's my leaves. Wrong. This is one whole leaf. This is a compound leaf. So that's where that node and knowing where your stems and your growth points at are very important, because if you take this and stick it in and you're like, why isn't it growing? Why isn't it growing? Okay, yeah, for cuttings that take a long time, will the cuttings discolor? Yes. So multiple things could happen when you put them on. I've had where cuttings will drop all their leaves, but as long as they're firm, leave them. Sometimes the leaves will fall off. Generally, and I've also had it where they put on new growth, and I thought for sure they have roots, and I've taken them out of the pot, and there's no roots forming. The tops just continued growing. Generally, you'll know if a cutting hasn't taken because it'll rot. So smushiness, and that's why you usually do more than one cutting. You know, some plants you'll have 100% success. Most plants you're not going to. So say you have, you know, 5 cuttings of something that's sort of medium, you might get 3 and 2 may die. So always do 1 in a spare. You know, did you have a question, Stacy?
Well, I just wanted to read a question from one of our participants. My princess plant didn't like the recent frost. Would I be able to take some cuttings to propagate?
What was the plant? I missed the name.
Princess plant?
Oh yeah, because they're frost sensitive. Yes, do so. If you have foliage that hasn't been hit by the frost, then do so. And like I said, you could start that in water even. You know, a lot of these you can't start in water. The water should be replenished. But yeah, it's super easy to propagate. But if all the tips have mushed out, you could still do older sections. So that's in a case where you don't have the time to wait. You know, frost comes again, it might kill the whole entire plant. So yeah, cut away. Something else I wanted to talk about too was sometimes you don't want to do, you know, I worked in a nursery for years and years, and we wanted to get as many cuttings as we can off of a plant. So say you have I'm going to do this little one actually.
After that, we have a couple more questions too coming in. So
okay, so say you have this here. You know, I could do a cutting, and that could be my tip cutting. But then this is still green and bendable. You could do cuttings down the whole entire length of the stem. It just gets more difficult for it to root on its own. So the woodier it becomes, the harder and the older the growth point is, that's when you want to think about using hormones, right? But if you're trying to get as many plants as you can, I could completely cut this plant all the way down and get multiple cuttings of it. So you don't just have to do tip cuttings. The tip cuttings are going to be, 1, they're the most accessible. 2, they're going to be the ones that are going to take the most because they have the auxin. but I've done tons of plants where you just go down the whole entire length, and we usually stop when the poor plant's just like this thing. So yeah, more questions? Were there more questions?
Definitely more questions.
Okay.
So since it's fall, is it the wrong time to propagate outdoor plants?
It can be, yeah. Definitely, I'm not going to say it's the wrong time, but a lot of times plants have completely, like there's woody plants, like say you're trying to propagate a peach tree, it's only woody material. And yes, you can propagate woody material, but I would recommend a rooting hormone. Your grapes this time of year, you could take woody canes and stick them in the ground and they'll probably root. It really depends on the plant. But for like roses, I always wait for that spring growth. Perennials, I always wait for that spring growth. If you're afraid you're going to lose a plant, like we're talking about with the princess plant, because you're afraid it's going to freeze out, go ahead and try it for sure. But ideally, that's why we're talking about spring is the best, because they're actively growing. But there's some plants like mandinas that are growing year round. They don't care.
Okay, 2 more questions. How long do you like to hang on to a plant waiting for it to flower? I have an orchid cactus cutting that I got a fair amount of new growth in the year I've had it, but it hasn't flowered yet. Would you keep?
Oh, yeah, no, we it takes a while for a cacti to bloom. So yeah, just a year, that's no. I mean, some cacti, Echinopsis, could bloom, they could put on giant bloom and the plant will only be like this big. It really depends on the cacti. But if you took it from cuttings to roots, and that's only been within a year, give it some time. I mean, some cactus take years and years before they even bloom. So it really depends, but no, that's fine. Speaking of succulents, that's a good segue. So succulents are completely different for the most part. And how am I on time? Okay, just have a few more things. Okay, so for succulents, it's still the same idea, new growth, right? And your escheverias, okay, I always joke, the cute succulents, when people are like, I love succulents, they're so cute. And I show them this big, gnarly Echinopsis with, spines this big. I'm like, you mean that? They're like, no, the cute ones, like the escheverias and the sedums and the string of pearls, the cute ones. For the most part, you could cut those and stick them in soil and they'll root just fine. So we're talking about your cacti, and the more succulent-y, the more you should take these tips to heart. So we use either pumice, which is the white rock, I can't say that, or we use red lava, sort of fairly large red lava. Both you could buy in small bags, right? At Ace, they have them. So here you have a cacti. Here's a tip of a cacti, and you cut it. Now, interesting thing, remember I say you always cut where nodes are at? Well, on a cacti, all these are nodes. All the spines on a cacti are the reduced leaves. And remember, leaves grow out of nodes. So these are all growth points. So that's why we cut right there. So I'm not going to take this and directly stick it into our growing media. You're going to do something called callus. And all callus is you're allowing it to scab over and heal that big wound. Because if you put it in a wet media, it's basically like cutting yourself and then going, I'm going to pack it with dirt. I wonder why I got infected, right? You don't want to do that. And you don't want to lay it on its side. What happens if you were to lay this on its side for days or weeks on end, that auxin is going to move with gravity, pull on one side. So when you go to plant it, you're going to have just roots forming on one side. So you're going to leave it upright in a pot with nothing, right? And then it's going to callus, which means just firm over. And you can actually see roots are forming right there. So we leave them for a very long time. So you can also do secondary cuttings, but note, we draw sometimes with a Sharpie, an arrow, because do you know which way's up? A midsection of a cacti? I don't know. So we usually draw arrows. Now I don't know. Oops, we didn't have an arrow. So we might plant it upside down. And then we put it in the media, doesn't go on the mist bench. It goes into a bright, but no direct sun area where it gets very minimal water. And then when they form roots, then we move them into their potting soil. And then we still hold off watering them for a few days until they get adjusted. So that's the difference between succulents and leafy plants as far as cuttings go. You want to let your succulents callus over. On a cut succulent, what happens to the top of the cut plant? Good question. I wish I had it right here. Let me see. Oh, I do. Hold on a second.
While she's having us hold, I'll answer that one question. Do you ever root cuttings in water instead of perlite and vermiculite? And Marlene already spoke to this, and yes, it's very easy to do lots of houseplants in water.
I just don't like doing it because, you know, if you miss a few days, that water becomes anaerobic bacteria, and you could rot a cutting out pretty fast. And the roots get all tangled up if you have more than one in a container. And when you go to transplant it, the roots are all tangled and you do root damage. This is what happens. So this was cut. Remember what happens? We cut the auxin producing top off of this cactus. Then all of a sudden the cytokinin was able to then produce side pups, and look at, now it's getting a side baby. Side baby, it's a technical term, side baby, right? So that's what happens. So a lot of times when we cut the tops off of our cacti, we'll do it just so we get little plantlets, and then you can just twist it off. You get to twist it off. Twist it off. Now we have a new plant, but I'll still let that callus just sit for a few days, and then you can put that in your, so that's what happens. One more thing before is this is a plant growing in our easy cloners, which are behind me, which are hydroponic units. It's just air and moisture. So look at the roots here. So this is a big root system. Don't let your cuttings get this bad. But if you have something like this, you know, pretty long, you could cut them. It's like a haircut, and then pop them up into soil and then water them in. So yeah, I think I covered everything. Any more questions?
Except for we have more questions. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So can Coreopsis be grown from cuttings?
What was that? Coreopsis?
Mm-hmm.
That one actually is sort of a basal growth there. You know what? I'm trying to picture like the tick seed Coreopsis. I do believe has nodes along the stems. So yeah, you can. It's been a while since I worked with Coreopsis.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Could you propagate a copper spoon plant that's super stretched out by cutting it up, like you just pointed out? I have one that only has leaves on the very top, and I'm wondering if sections down further would be okay with no leaves.
Okay, so a copper spoon plant, that's the common name. I don't know, what's the scientific name? Is it, okay, so I'm just gonna take it. If it's stretched out, the question was it's stretched out, right? And it just has growth at the top. And she wants to know if she could take those cuttings. It's a succulent, you already answered it. Okay, perfect, yeah. I thought it was a succulent, but yeah, if you have leggy succulents, if you cut them back, it's gonna produce. So if you have echeverias and there's nothing, and you have that rosette at the end, you cut them back, it's gonna make it bushier. And then you could take that cutting and pot it up.
Okay, can you propagate plants by separating it at the root, for example, a snake plant or a ZZ plant?
Yes, oh, thank you, wow. Snake plant, ZZ plant, thank you. Yes, so division is another way of propagating plants. Some things like ferns, agapanthus, you can't do leaf cuttings, stem cuttings, you have to divide them. So yes, ZZ plant, we propagate by leaves. So here's the leaf. We just took one leaf, we stuck it in soil, and then a plant formed off of there. They get very big and bulky. And yeah, you could take it out of its pot and divide it that way. And then same with Sansevieria. So this is mother-in-law's tongue, a snake plant. Here's portion of the leaf, and same thing happened here. A new plant formed right here. But yes, as they get bigger, they'll multiply, and you can take them out and divide them up. Yeah. It's almost like they were right here, knew I had those two plants. That was a little freaky.
So it looks like the rest are just gushing compliments about how informative, such a wealth of knowledge. Love Marlene, the plant lady. It's just, this was amazing. So I think people enjoyed it. So
Good.
This seems perfect. I think it's 12:59. Oh, we got another couple questions.
And you know, people have other questions too. I don't want to take up your whole time. My email is mrsimon@ucdavis.edu. You can find me on social media. You know, I answer questions. I mean, I want to answer them here because people might have the same question as well, but I don't want to hold you up, Stacy, or anyone else.
Yeah, best Zoom class ever. That's oh, wow. Okay, so let's stay a couple more minutes just
Okay.
to answer questions, and then we'll stop it or something. So let's see. When cutting a fruit tree, are there other considerations to the cutting and to the tree cut from?
Yeah, so for sure. Um, the woodier, the more hormones you're going to have to use, the slower it's going to take to root. I wouldn't bag it necessarily. And if you bag it, be very careful because it's woody. So you don't want it to be in a completely wet environment. Then you get into fruit tree pruning practices. So if you're just doing a few cuttings, it's okay to do tip parts, but you don't want to remove, the tips of every branch on certain fruit trees because they might fruit on that year's growth and you just are removing that year's growth if that happens. So, it's fine if you're just doing a few cuttings here and there. Always cut back to a node. Don't leave a nub, a little exposed nub at the end because the plant will heal and grow at that node. And then of course, it's like directional pruning. Prune so like there's a node facing out versus in, because if you prune for an inside node, the growth is going to go inside your tree. So like with roses, you don't want to grow in out. So directional pruning.
Okay, well, maybe we'll just have this be the last question.
Okay.
If you have to propagate indoors, how do you set up your plants in relation to a grow light?
Yes. Okay. So behind me, and I don't think you could see, but those LED strip lights are so affordable these days. And they need to be pretty close though. You can see the lights we have. They're about maybe 12 inches, 18 inches above the cuttings. So for an LED, that's just a strip light. You could also buy LED full spectrum light bulbs that fit into any lamps. The thing is that they should be closer to the plant than far away. Yeah, so that's a good idea. Some of these plants that you're propagating, just any exposure to light, not direct sun. I wouldn't put it right on a south wall, but I'm finding that it's pretty darn cheap getting LED. I just bought a pack of like 8 of them, and you can buy them individually too. So, but yeah, definitely light's going to help. I'm trying to make it so you don't spend any money really. You just go to your neighbor and say, hey, can I have that cutting and maybe some perlite, and that's it. And it's very doable. But LED, if you could have that extra supplemental light, yeah, of course. So,
All right. Well, I think everybody is really appreciative, including me. Thank you so much. That was fabulous and so
okay.
fun.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I'll just say for anybody who's still on, we have Marlene again in a few weeks. So let's see, December 11th, 10 easy house plants to grow. Plus there are lots of other offerings that may interest you if today interested you. So thanks everyone. Hope you have a wonderful holiday and thanks for joining us.
Bye.